Today's episode of the Our Hen House podcast is being sponsored by our partner, A Well-Fed World. A Well-Fed World is a hunger relief and animal protection organization chipping away at two of the world's most immense, unnecessary, and unconscionable forms of suffering. The suffering of people hungry from lack of food, and the suffering of animals used and abused for food. Mending our unjust food system is a critical part of solving the world's most destructive and persistent problems. Fortunately, the plant-based foods that promote health and well-being are the same foods that conserve resources to better feed the world, while reducing greenhouse gas emissions and protecting the environment. A well-fed world provides the means for change by empowering individuals, social justice organizations, and political decision-makers to embrace the benefits of plant-based foods and farming. Learn more at awfw.org.
Our hen house is a squawking house. Our hen house is their hen house. Our hen house, ooh, it's a funky fresh house. Our hen house is your hen house.
Welcome to Our Hen House. This is Mariann Sullivan. We have...
And this is...
Oh, I forgot. I forgot you were there too.
And this is Jasmine Singer. We just practiced this 1 second ago.
We're on Skype with each other. So we have this completely amazing show this week. I mean, oh my God. My guest is Moby. Yes.
What was that?
My guest is Moby. Did I say it was Moby?
I didn't hear you. I'm sorry. The Skype must be cutting out. Who is that guest?
It would be Moby.
Wow.
Incredibly famous, iconic musician, passionate activist, vegan restaurateur, author, incredibly cool human being. What a great interview. I loved it so much. And your interview is Dr. Neal Barnard.
What?
Yeah.
He is the helming of course, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. And he has this incredible influence on the health-based arguments for veganism and against animal experimentation. And, you know, the world is really just starting to catch up to these messages, which is largely due to Neal's passion and devotion. And I really loved this interview with him so much.
Yeah, he's a great guy, and he really has been doing this for a long time before. Everybody's catching up. Yeah,
and well, PCRM, I mean, they really cover every issue, like every single issue that involves animal exploitation, and they're changing the world. And I think his like 150,000th book is about to come out or something. He's written so many books.
And of course, we'll have news, Rising Anxieties. Actually, our bonus content is more of your interview with Neal. Isn't that right?
It's fantastic. I mean, this is for our Flock members only. So if you are a Flock member, you can expect an inbox, email in your inbox this Tuesday. And also, in addition to the private Facebook Flock group, we post it there as well. But the interview with Neal that I did for the bonus content it's moving. It goes a little bit into his childhood and his early days, just kind of making these connections. And thank goodness he did, because now he is Dr. Neal Barnard, and he's creating massive change. So
if you aren't a member of the Flock and you're dying to listen to that interview, you can of course join the Flock at ourhenhouse.org/donate. It's only $10
By the way,
a month.
Yes, $10 a month. That's it. It's like a latte and a half.
And what you're really doing, obviously, is not just getting the extra content, but supporting this podcast, which we really appreciate. So thank you all to our Flock members. Thank you to all of our Flock members.
Do you know that like over 10 years ago, I think it was actually 10 years ago, like 2008. I don't know if you remember this. You probably do. I wound up at a group dinner and Moby was there, and it was at Caravan of Dreams in the East Village, and there was maybe like 20 of us there, and I was sort of at the end of the table and Moby was in the middle. And somehow toward the end of the night we started talking about grains, as vegans do. And I started talking about how I liked millet, and he was like, oh, it reminds me of starvation and world hunger. And I was like, oh yeah, I can see why. And so when you were preparing for the interview with Moby, I was like, don't ask him about millet.
Well, you'll have to listen to the interview to find out whether I went into that riveting topic.
Anyway, speaking of riveting topics, oh gosh, there's a lot going on in the animal protection movement this week.
Yeah, I guess we felt like we really had to talk about this whole Me Too movement as it's affecting the animal protection movement. Even though we don't usually talk inside baseball about the movement, we like to focus on the activists and, of course, always focus on the animals. But sometimes it rises enough to the surface that you can't avoid it. And there have been all these stories. It's mostly so far. It's been about stuff going on at HSUS, and of course, Paul Shapiro and Wayne Pacelli have both been named in a number of articles with very inappropriate conduct towards largely young women who worked for them. And it's just, it's upsetting to me, and I'm sure to many people, because I wouldn't say I'm close friends with these people, but I know them and have always respected their work. I continue to respect their work. I think that's something you can. People are complicated, but what has happened is it's seriously disturbing, and I don't think we can let this moment pass without mentioning it and talking about the fact that this has to stop. This is not helping anybody. It has to stop.
Yeah. This has been going on in our movement for as long as I've been in it, and I'm sure well before then. But I remember coming to, as like a 24-year-old 14 years ago, and people were talking about it then. There were names that were being rattled around that are still being rattled around. There were names that were being rattled around that aren't.
I actually don't remember any of that. Most of the stuff I'm aware of has been the past 3 or 4 years. The rumors have been surfacing about the same few people, but maybe I'm a little out of touch.
Yeah, I guess it's just I think what's happening now is the culture of being able to oppress women and make that normal and okay and acceptable, and you can get away with it. That's what's being dismantled.
Yeah, I actually think that it's the big part that's being dismantled is being able to get away with it. And we've known for a long time that you can't do this stuff. Like I think people know that you can't sexually harass people in the workplace. That's been against the rules for a long time. But somehow some people didn't seem to get that memo, or they got the memo and they thought this is where the real problem has been. Obviously, that doesn't count for me. I can get away with it. And it's just sad to see that has happened within the animal protection movement, as it apparently has happened everywhere. It's just a tragedy.
What's interesting to me, anyway, right before I became a career animal activist, I was working in AIDS awareness activism, and I was young. I was 22, and I started sleeping with my boss, and we did it. We did it for a while, and it started to leak. It started to get out, and when I was cornered ultimately in a conference room with all of the heads of the heads of the heads and him, the guy, I resigned. I looked at him across the table, and I realized I didn't want to speak up for myself. I didn't want to make him lose his job when I was so young and he had been there for so many years. And so I left, and I left that movement, and then of course I found the animal rights movement and found that there's a lot of intersections there. But I also didn't realize it until many years later that there was like a really yucky power dynamic going on that it never even occurred to me, because I was like, well, this was consensual. I was in it too. But he was my boss, and the culture there was like the reason why it came out was because people thought I was getting, special treatment, and maybe I was. I don't know. I guess that makes me so sad and really heartbroken, not only in retrospect for like younger me, but also for all of the women who have presumably left the animal rights movement because of similar situations. And I want that to fucking stop.
Yeah, that's one of the tragedies of this. There are a number, but yeah, the animals certainly aren't gaining from this. And it makes me crazy when people say that this should be like swept under the rug or whatever because it's bad for the animals. This has to come out. This is an unhealthy basis on which to build this movement. If it's happening, it has to stop. And in the long run, will. I mean, it has to come out not just because women are leaving the movement, because it's wrong, and you can't build a movement like this. So, and it's certainly not. I don't want to imply that this is every man in the movement. That drives me crazy. Like, there are loads and loads of men who do not engage in this behavior, and there are some women who do. It's not necessarily a gendered thing, though it's certainly more predominantly in the other direction, I think. And I don't want to imply that this is the culture of the movement. There are clearly pockets where this has been a problem, and it has to stop. And I don't know what's going to happen to Paul or Wayne. I don't know whether they're going to leave. I don't know whether they're going to see the light. And
Paul is not with.
Paul is already.
Oh, you mean the movement? Yeah.
Well, actually, I was thinking HSUS in reference to Wayne. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what should happen. But this what are they thinking? Why does anybody think this is okay to carry on flirtations leading to sexual contact with people who work for you?
Not.
This is we all know that you're not supposed to do that. This isn't the same as meeting somebody in the workplace and falling in love. It's not the same thing at all. This is older men and younger women and carrying on deliberate flirtations and repeated sexual contact. It's don't confuse it with just you fell in love at the workplace. That's not what's going on here. Oh, I don't know.
Right. Well, and this is also something that goes on in
predatory behavior in some way or another.
Oh, and it's predatory behavior. As a lesbian in this movement for a long time, I've definitely been on this end of being prey to some women, but I digress. The point is, as you said,
I have actually never been the subject of sexual harassment, of which I am very pleased, though it does leave me a little out of the conversation.
Oh my gosh, Mariann, wow. Okay, but it goes on in other movements, as I just mentioned.
It goes on everywhere.
Right. Of course, it happened in that previous movement that I just mentioned, the AIDS awareness movement that I was in. And beyond that, can you imagine the misogyny and the misuse of women in the meat industrial complex and the, whole in the you were talking to me about within the janitorial
I saw some documentary about what happens to women who work in janitorial services, and those women are so vulnerable because they're in places alone at night, and it was unbelievable. It was horrifying.
Well, so obviously whenever you're dealing with any situation where there are men in power predominantly, which in our movement there are, and in all of these other places we're talking about there are, you're going to be dealing with situations like this. What's interesting to me is it's the animal rights movement that seems to be getting some of the headlines right now, and I'm wow, okay.
Well, I think it's also, and this is, I'm not saying this is true of every animal rights organization, but it is a sign of poor HR policies.
Definitely.
It's not inevitable in the sense that organizations can't do something to prevent it from happening, and they can do loads to prevent it from happening, and it shouldn't have been happening. And I'm really sad that it has, and I'm really sad that we have to be talking about it. And I think we should move on. I think that's enough.
Well, I just want to say one final thing, which is that when you and I were talking about it recently, you said it had to happen. And I think that our movement is going to temporarily suffer, and then we're going to strengthen. And so keep your eye on the big picture. I guess that's my sort of takeaway here. Keep your eye on the big picture, that stick around because we need you, and the animals need you, and justice needs you, and equality needs you. And we have to fight through this and strengthen as a movement that is aiming to end the exploitation of animals, all animals, whether they're non-human or human. So I am devastated. I barely slept last night, and I'm emboldened, and I have hope. I hope that others can latch onto that too.
I think in the long run, I know in the long run, this is a good thing. This could not be allowed to continue. So yeah, it's a blow, but a temporary one for sure, because we're winning and we're going to continue to win. And I hope that everybody involved continues to participate in some useful way, because the animals sure need us all.
They do. The animals need Moby.
The animals really have Moby too, because he is a passionate activist. I think he would identify himself as an animal rights activist above being identified as a musician. I really do.
Definitely.
And he is a very famous, very iconic, very, very prolific musician with extraordinary talent. So I'm just going to get right to it. He'll be joining me right after this. Our Hen House is brought to you in part by Health IQ, which is an insurance company that uses science and data to help health-conscious people like runners, cyclists, weightlifters, and vegans get lower rates on their life insurance. 56% of Health IQ customers save between 4% and 33% on their life insurance. So, like saving money on your car insurance for being a good driver, Health IQ can save you money on your life insurance for living a health-conscious lifestyle. And, you know, if you're like me, you don't really pay attention to many of the financial requirements of daily life. I'm pathetic on that, but it's really important to take care of your loved ones through getting some life insurance if you don't have it. So go to healthiq.com/OHH to support the show, or mention the promo code OHH when you talk to a Health IQ agent to see if you qualify. Welcome to our Hen House, Moby.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great, and it's so exciting to be speaking to you. And I want to start off the interview with kind of an obvious question, but one I think everybody wants the answer to, for everyone who cares as passionately about animals as you do. So where did it come from, the animal thing? And I'm specifically wondering whether the whole punk ethos, which is kind of your era that you started in, contributed to this passion.
Well, I mean, like most people, I grew up with what I think of as, I was going to say a suburban paradox, but I'll even go broader than that. I'll say it's sort of a human paradox, which is when I was growing up, I loved animals so unconditionally. I mean, we had rescue dogs and rescued cats and rescued guinea pigs and rescued lizards and rescued mice, and I loved them more than most of the humans I knew. But here's the paradox part, is I also went to McDonald's and Burger King and ate salami sandwiches and bologna sandwiches, and it never seemed paradoxical or inconsistent to me to, with one part of my brain, love animals, and then the other part of my brain, eat animals. And that changed when I was 19, and I was petting a rescue cat that we had rescued, and all of a sudden a connection was made in my brain, and I realized that this cat, his name was Tucker, had 2 eyes and a central nervous system and the most remarkably rich emotional life. And I sort of extrapolated, and I realized every animal with 2 eyes and a central nervous system has an incredibly rich emotional life. And that was 30 some odd years ago. So that was really my Saul on the road to Damascus vegan moment.
Yeah, that's pretty remarkable. I mean, so many of us, I came to that moment, I guess, but it was, I was in my 40s by the time I figured it out. It's kind of amazing that you saw this thing that other people just didn't see, and just on your own. I've been reading Porcelain, which is your memoir about your early days, and it really seems like you were such an outsider in so many ways. You were poor in a place where others were rich, and then in your early club days you were white, where almost everybody around you was black and Latino, and you were sober at that point when everybody else was getting high. I kind of wonder whether this, and I've seen this in other people too, this kind of willingness to be an outsider and to go on being an outsider has something to do with allowing yourself to get it about animals. Do you think these things were related to you, for you, a particular type of personality?
Yeah, although I will say that when I was growing up, I desperately did not want to be an outsider. To some extent, I feel like my outsider status was socioeconomically forced on me, because I grew up very poor in a wealthy town, and I grew up the only child of a hippie mom in a town full of stockbrokers. So I wanted to be tall and good at sports and come from a wealthy family, but I didn't. So being an outsider, I think 2 things resulted from that. One is you develop a more keen sense of observation. Rather than belonging, you're always observing. And oftentimes when people feel like they're a part of the environment in which they grew up, they take great comfort in that. They take comfort in their families, they take comfort in their community. And I didn't find comfort in those things, so I really valued the things where I could find comfort, and one of those things was with the company of animals.
And I assume another thing was music.
Yeah, so music, animals, nature, books. When I was denied the sort of quotidian comfort of, community and family and other things that people traditionally rely on, I had to look elsewhere. And animals from an early age just proved themselves to be so much better than people.
Oh, wow. That's borne out, hasn't it?
Yeah, animals didn't smoke cigarettes and get in arbitrary fights and et cetera. Animals were just, safer, kinder, more predictable. At least that was always my experience. So clearly at an early age, I was hardwired to be an animal lover.
So there's this story in Porcelain about this. It's kind of like a hilarious and horrifying story about this revelation you had in the meatpacking district. It was when you were working in clubs. And do you recall that story? And can you kind of share it with us?
Yeah, well, the meatpacking district in New York now is the meatpacking district in name only. It's now one of the wealthiest, most gentrified parts of New York City, but when I first started DJing in New York in the 80s, it was still very much the meatpacking district. And so when I went to and from work, I was, stepping over carcasses and walking through blood and watching as the underpaid illegal immigrants washed blood and offal into the gutter. And it was horrifying, especially as an animal lover and a vegan. And then I think I had this one experience where I used to wheel my records around on a skateboard because it was easier than carrying them. And I think they skidded in some very greasy, disgusting combination of blood and offal. That's OFFAL,
right,
but I guess it also works as AWFUL too. And it just reinforced to me the idea that, the wrongness of it. And I think that I'm stating the obvious here, but the culture that we live in, when things are wrong, the people who profit from the wrongness do their best to hide the wrong. So they put slaughterhouses very far away, and they put feedlots very far away, so that no one really knows the truth of where animal products come from. But working in the meatpacking district, I saw it every day in such a visceral way, and it just sort of strengthened my commitment to animal rights activism and veganism.
So you were already vegan, but at this point, you just knew this was more of your life's work.
Yeah, I guess there is that question that each one of us hopefully wrestles with, which is, what is a good use of a life? What potential meaning and significance can a life have? And for me, first and foremost, above my own happiness, above my own interests, animal rights and animal activism comes first, above anything else.
One of the things that was just so interesting about that story is that you immediately left for a Christian retreat on Martha's Vineyard, which is talking about being in very different worlds at the same time. And, that was a period in your life in which you were, I don't want to define your process then or your process now, but that you were really trying to find common ground with other Christians to confront their attitudes towards animals. And did that process help you teach you about activism?
Yeah, it did. I'm sure you've had that experience, and lots of people listening have had that experience, is, when we care passionately about something, our immediate response, or, what we want to do is run out into the world and scream at people and hit people and tear off their fur coats and, smack the McDonald's hamburgers out of their hands. But if we do that, we realize that all we do is make people mad. and we don't necessarily make the world a better place. We just make the meat eaters and the fur wearers angry and defensive. And so over time, it's this dialectic where we figure out what works, as activists. And we also have to give ourselves some wiggle room to make mistakes. Passionate, committed people taking their beliefs out into the world are bound to make mistakes. But hopefully we learn from them and our activism changes. And this might sound odd, but we become like little activist ninjas. We go out into the world and figure out like what's the best plan of attack for a given situation. Like maybe sometimes that's direct action and maybe sometimes it's more subtle. Like going up to a 78-year-old woman wearing a fur coat and screaming in her face and calling her a murderer might not necessarily convince her to join the vegan cause.
Yeah, of course, nothing else might either, too. But maybe there is a way. But I really appreciate your saying both that we should strive to find the best way, but also forgive ourselves and each other if, we try something and it doesn't quite work out and wasn't quite the right way.
Well, it's funny. I was doing an interview with a very, very militant vegan activist. And I too am a very militant vegan activist, but I also recognize, as I said, like sometimes subtlety accomplishes more than screaming. But this activist really took issue with me for that perspective. And I've been a vegan now for over 30 years, and so I said to this person, I said, well, 25 years ago, when you were eating hamburgers, what would you have done if I had walked up to you and your friends at McDonald's and started screaming at you? And the person suddenly realized, like, oh, yeah, that's right. Not everyone is born a vegan activist, and we have to reach people where they are, even if it's not where we want them to immediately be.
Yeah, and the point isn't so much to find, because it's improper to do it in a more aggressive way. The point is always to find the most effective way. Yeah.
And I try to tell other activists, I was like, the goal of activism is not to make you feel good. The goal of activism is not to please the activist, it's to make the world a better place and save animals.
Yeah, absolutely. So we all, God knows I don't know what the most effective way is most of the time, but that's always the question we should be asking.
Yeah. And sort of following on from that, I would say that like the other thing is to sort of commit to do it every day for the rest of our lives, knowing we're going to make mistakes, knowing we're going to fall short, but still every day wake up and keep doing it.
Let's talk about your music a little bit. I'm talking to Moby. I might as well talk about music because it hasn't been that issue oriented as a rule. But I'm wondering whether you feel that the impulse behind what drives you to create music actually relates to the impulse to make the world better. Is your art related to activism? I mean, even when it isn't direct, I know you have done things that are directly related to your activism, but even when it isn't, do you feel that they're coming from the same place inside you?
I hope so. And so what I've been thinking about lately regarding art, music, what have you, is, there's that old cliche that all politics are local. And if you keep going further with that, you can say that all politics are individual. Everything in our world is a result of us collectively as individuals. Coming together as individuals in a group, making choices, making decisions. And there's so many ways to approach that. We can approach that politically, philosophically, economically. But what really, really interests me is looking at the individual themselves. And, because it's sort of like legislation is very important. And changing mores is also very important. But if you can reach an individual and get them to change, their entire life is changed, and the choices they make are changed. Meaning I'd rather get someone to become a compassionate lover of animals than to simply put handcuffs on them and prevent them from eating hamburgers. Because once you take the handcuffs off, they go back to the old behavior, or the old behavior metastasizes and manifests in other ways. But if you can change, like identify with people and understand them compassionately and change their hearts and minds, that's when true collective systemic change happens.
And do you believe that the impulse to do that, to reach the individual, is something you're doing both with your music and with your activism?
Yeah, I mean, musically, I'm just not very good at writing issue-oriented songs. I've tried.
Not too many people are.
Neal Young, Joe Strummer, John Fogerty, I can think of a few people who are really good at writing specific issue-oriented songs. I'm not one of those people. I tend to write music that's more emotional. But it's the same way I approach social media, is I will post tons of pictures of animals being adorable and emotional because I want to wake up who they are emotionally, their limbic system, their sense of compassion and love, and then you change the person and they become a better person for the rest of their life, hopefully.
Yeah, and
I'm not saying I'm capable of doing that, but I try.
Well, yeah, we all just put our efforts out there and hope that somebody sees them. I'm sure many people are seeing yours. You've also done some videos that related to animals, either with I think that Simple Love had a video that featured pigs and factory farms. Is that one of the ways that you try to connect your music to your animal activism?
Yeah, I mean, not everything I do has a direct connection to or correlation with activism.
No, of course not. Yeah.
But
I'm not expecting that. I'm just kind of trying to explore whether there's some kind of whether it hangs together for you, not so much what you're putting out there, but whether it comes from the same place in you.
Yeah, and it's trying to find a balance, because one thing I've learned is part of my effectiveness as an activist is to have interests outside of activism, meaning if every song I wrote was about animal activism, and if everything I posted on social media was about animal activism, I would turn off a lot of people. And I don't care about turning off people from a career perspective. I worry about turning them off as an animal activist. Mm-hmm. And so, if I'm posting things that have nothing to do with animal activism but that resonate with people, it means that the next time I post something about animals, there's a bigger audience and people might be more willing to listen.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I think that's true of all of us, but, of course, more so for you because you have such a huge following and passionate attention to your music. I did notice that the artwork for this recent version of Like a Motherless Child had a picture of a cow or a calf. And it was hard for me, maybe not for everybody, but that song, Like a Motherless Child, is, it's hard not to think of the dairy industry because it makes all calves motherless. Do you like making that kind of almost subtle reference that maybe I would pick up and maybe somebody else wouldn't, but it makes that connection?
Well, it's trying to accomplish lots of things with one tool. And so, and for example, like social media, every now and then someone will come to me and say, aren't you tired of preaching to the choir? And I'm like, oh, but I'm not. And sometimes if you reach someone, suppose there's an animal activist in the middle of Oklahoma who's feeling bereft and lonely, and their connection to other activists is through social media. So if I post something, it's for them. And it's also for people who might not agree with us yet. So the same thing with music, with lyrics, with art, with videos is to connect, to broaden the circle and get more people involved, but also strengthen the community that already exists among activists.
Yeah, I have to say that's such an important thing for us here. I mean, most of our listeners are vegan and animal rights activists, and you could say that we're preaching to the choir too, but we're a family and we need to be talking to each other. So that's That's kind of what we do. And then everybody listening to this, I know, goes out and reaches out into the world with their message.
Yeah, and remembering that, like, there are a lot of people in big cities who have a very active community of activists, but there are a lot of people who are very understandably cautious, who live in places where they might be the only vegan they know, they might be the only activist they know. And if we can reach out to them and make them feel more welcome and more supported, that just seems like a really good thing.
And Motherless Child is off your next album, which I think is called Everything Was Beautiful and Nothing Hurt. Can you share anything about that album and whether you feel... I'm not asking you to relate it to animal activism, but just how it makes you feel in relationship to everything you do in the world, including your animal activism.
Well, so it's sort of what I was talking about earlier, which is looking at who we are as individuals, like not political, not economic, not even broadly cultural, but as an individual. And I had this sort of Netflix-related epiphany a while ago. I was watching some documentary on animals in Africa, which is what you do when you're sober and middle-aged. And there was this footage of a watering hole during a drought. And so all the animals were there, the lions and the giraffes and the hippos and the alligators and, lots of really dangerous animals, clearly giraffes not being one of the dangerous ones. But, all these very dangerous animals. And in the middle of it was a little troop of tiny monkeys. These monkeys maybe 3 feet tall. And, there's a helicopter going by overhead. Clearly the man is watching. So there's this troop of monkeys, and they're hiding in some brush, and every now and then they work up their courage, they run to the watering hole, they scoop up a handful of water, filthy water with like hippo and alligator poop in it, and then they run back to their little bush, hoping that no one will eat them or kill them. And when I was watching that, I thought, oh, these are our ancestors. And I was like, our ancestors, only up until recently, were terrified of being eaten and were scared all the time. Scared of starving to death, scared of dental problems, scared of being eaten. And it sort of makes me understand humans a little better. Like, we have this hereditary legacy of fear. And so, how that relates to the record is like trying to, as I said earlier, like relate to people on a more empathetic, compassionate level, understanding that like humans are really scared. So oftentimes when they make bad choices, it's just that they're still on some atavistic hereditary level, like those monkeys at the watering hole, just like trying to get what they can and not be eaten.
Wow, that's that is such a great story, and it helps explain to me why I'm scared all the time. Just a satisfying thing to understand.
Well, fear is what kept us alive for think of like 2 troops of monkeys at the watering hole 1 million years ago or 500,000 years ago. The monkeys who weren't scared got eaten really quickly. And the monkeys who were terrified got their water and were able to reproduce and make more scared monkeys. And so all of our ancestors really had 2 things in common. They were scared and vicious. And so now we have 7.5 billion humans who are all scared and vicious.
Yeah, that explains so much, doesn't it?
We have the capacity. Yeah, we have the capacity to not be scared and to not be vicious. And so part of what we have to do is like encourage people to move beyond fear and anger and to be, strong and compassionate.
So you have never seemed to waver regarding veganism and your passion for animals, but you seem to have had a fraught relationship with Christianity, with religion, with God, or maybe fraught is the wrong, but not totally consistent. So can you tell us a little bit about that evolution and specifically how it relates to attitudes regarding animals and nature?
Yeah, so many other things in my life, whether it was like career, Christianity, atheism, living in a city, living in the country, all these other things that I sort of used to define myself. Ultimately, over time, I've seen that they're fairly arbitrary. Whereas how we treat animals is not arbitrary. Like there's, objective metrics by which we can observe how our actions towards animals really has real-world consequences. Where so many of the other choices I've made just, they were elective. They were kind of arbitrary. And so that's one of the things that has kept me, in these now like almost 35 years of animal activism, of being, consistent and not once ever doubting it.
You mentioned also before that you're sober, and it seems like you've had a also somewhat fraught relationship with sobriety. And it just was so interesting reading the book, because through the first half of the book, you were sober and you were living in this incredibly drug-fueled club scene. And then later you had experiences that you might never have experienced if you had not for a period rejected sobriety. So I'm just kind of wondering, like, is there a relationship between sobriety and art and activism for you? And is it all positive, or are there two sides to that story?
It's hard to say. I mean, I guess one of the greatest things about having been on both sides of the fence regarding sobriety, like at one point I was a very judgmental, sober Christian, and then I was a crazy, debauched, alcoholic, drug addict dating strippers and sex workers, and now I'm just a sober, middle-aged guy. But the nice thing is I can't really judge other people. Like when you've been through the ringer and when you've made terrible choices, it makes it harder to judge other people's choices.
Do you think that helps in your activism?
I hope so. I still have to remember when I was in high school eating McDonald's, there was one vegan woman at my high school, and I thought she was ridiculous. When I was 16 years old, I just wanted to eat McDonald's and go to Burger King and eat pepperoni pizza. And I thought this one vegan woman was absurd because she wouldn't play softball because the mitts were made out of leather. And now for the last 30-some-odd years, I've been that militant vegan, but I have to remember that at one point I wasn't.
Yeah.
And so that's why I have to really deal with people where they are today, because the problem with judging is, apart from the fact that it comes from fear, but judging also is predicated on this misconception of omniscience. When we judge someone, we think we know where they're coming from and where they're going. But as we are not God, we're incapable of omniscience, which makes judgment, apart from being wrong, it just makes it flawed.
How can you account for your ability to hold on to yourself, specifically vis-a-vis veganism and animal rights activism? Like, you had a lot of crazy ups and downs in your life, as you said. Like, you did a lot of drugs and alcohol, but this is the one piece that you always held on to. How do you account for that?
That it was outside of me. Meaning I never had a problem hurting myself, but I could never in good conscience do something that would cause or contribute to the suffering of an animal. And it was just so clear, like that's what I mean. Like, there's a lot of gray area in the world, but there's no gray area around suffering. If you hurt an animal, you see that you've hurt an animal. Like, it's just so completely clear. And you can also, you could even be very technical and say that, you look at stress hormones and cortisol and norepinephrine and, pupil dilation. There's actual objective physiological metrics by which you can determine whether something is suffering, or you can just look at the creature that's suffering and recognize that your actions have contributed to it. And I just could never in good conscience do that.
Do you think in some ways that the fact that you understood that you saw that about animals, kind of, and that created a through line for you in your life, did that kind of help save you? I mean, maybe save is the wrong word, but get you through things?
Yes. It's funny. I just finished writing the second memoir.
Oh, that's exciting. Just as I finished reading the first.
But it doesn't come out. It's not going to come out until, I think, May of 2019. Yeah. Like, it's still a long ways away from being released. And maybe this is a very odd thing to say, but the second memoir deals with both childhood and adulthood. Like, it's the period after the memoir you're reading, and it's also the period before that. And I gave it to a friend of mine to read, and they were reading about some childhood trauma, and they half lightheartedly said, "Wow, how are you not a psychopath?" Like, they were sort of saying, like, this amount of trauma, like, normally, like, breaks people. And I think animals were the thing that kept me from breaking.
I think a lot of us could say that. I mean, maybe not all of us have been through the same level of trauma, but animals do save us, I have to say. Speaking of saving us, you've said that the world in which we live is a catastrophe, and I think the term that I jotted down was calamitous apocalypse, which, I'm pretty much on board with, and a lot of people are. So let's talk a little bit about hope. Do you think it's possible the world could be on the edge of and capable of a monumental shift, or are you running out of hope?
Both. Well, I was going to say both in equal measure, but actually, like, honestly, I'm more of a pessimist. Because, I've been in AA for a while, and being in AA, you encounter lots of addicts by definition, because it's Alcoholics Anonymous, and you encounter drug addicts and alcoholics, and oftentimes the only thing that leads someone to get sober is being confronted with the consequences of their actions. And sometimes what happens is you're confronted with the consequences of your actions, you get sober, and you go on to live a long, happy, healthy life. But just as equally what happens is you're confronted with the consequences of your actions, but the consequences are too deleterious, you get sick and you die. Like someone who's addicted to cigarettes, like they go to the doctor says, if you keep smoking, you'll get emphysema and lung cancer, and so they quit smoking and they go on to be healthy. Or they go to the doctor says, oh, I'm sorry, you have emphysema and lung cancer, so if you quit smoking, it doesn't matter, you're still going to die. And I see our species as being like that. Like, do we change and go on to be happy and healthy, or are we killed by our actions? And right now, it seems like, honestly, our actions are going to kill us.
Yeah, things are looking pretty dark.
And it's that, like when do we collectively wake up? Like, what's it going to take? Because, I mean, clearly, in many ways, things are getting better. Like, people are more aware of, like, GMOs, and more people are vegetarian and vegan, and people are buying electric cars and, buying organic food, and just generally, you look at the last election, and, Trump did lose by 4 million votes. And so clearly we're not as terrible as we sometimes seem to be, but that doesn't matter if the consequences of our actions kill us.
I know that you've also said that humans are at their best when they're protecting the innocent, and I'm just wondering whether you feel that if we can encourage people to connect with animals who are really innocent, the most innocent, is that a way to make people better and ultimately to save the world? Is this like an issue that will save us?
It's waking up people's limbic system, which is their sense of compassion. And also, every time I read an article or a book with the Dalai Lama or Thich Nhat Hanh, or the day that you and I are talking is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, it's the idea of concern for something outside of yourself. And I think our culture is being decimated by selfishness. When the truth is, having a higher purpose and being in service to something, that's the way you live a better life. It's the way you live a happier life. I also think, in some ways, we're experiencing a really fascinating paradigm shift as the world moves from patriarchal to matriarchal. And I personally think that's a great move because I think matriarchal values are generally like healthier and more sustainable. But really the subtext to this crazy apocalypse we're going through is a patriarchy that's gone off the rails. You know, like women are more empowered than they've ever been and continue to be more empowered and stronger, which is great and wonderful. One of the issues, though, is that men don't know what to do. So you have these men who should be out, you know, protecting and defending and living lives of service, and instead they become abusive and vicious and selfish and racist and xenophobic and misogynistic. So I almost feel like men need to wake up and recognize, you know, that we were talking about the best use of strength is to be in service of a higher purpose and, you know, protect the innocent and defend the vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really moving thing to say and so important to keep in mind because we're moving forward into enormous cultural changes and it does feel like men have even more lost their way and will continue to lose their way as jobs disappear and things change. And anyway, I won't get started, but
yeah, I mean, and I'm hoping that somehow they've it's sort of like men will either figure it out or will become like spiders where men are irrelevant. You know, like there are many species on this planet where men provide a little bit of DNA, but apart from that, they don't really do anything.
Well, I'm a lesbian. I'm not even going to comment on that. I'm not going there because there are many men in my life that I hope don't disappear and continue on in my life. As a cisgendered
white Anglo-Saxon Protestant man, I have to say I'm generally not a huge fan of my gender. You know, I feel like men have to either like contribute or get out of the way.
So, what are the next steps for you? How are you? You contribute by way of your restaurant. You contribute by way of your music, and what do you see next on your, and of course by your constant unending activism and speaking out. So what else do you see in your future?
Just more, you know, I don't know what it is, but hopefully something.
Tell us a little bit about the restaurant.
Right. It's a restaurant called Little Pine, and it's here in Los Angeles, and it's a vegan restaurant. And I guess one of the things that makes it unique is that I run it as a nonprofit, so any profits that are generated by the restaurant go to animal rights organizations. So it's sort of entrepreneurial philanthropy.
And I'm in New York, so I'm very sad that Teeny is gone, but I am dying to try Little Pine. I hope I get there soon. I mean, I'm biased, but I like it. So what's your favorite thing to eat there? What's the best thing on the menu if I do make it there?
Right now, it's one of the starter, like it's a share plate restaurant, you know, so it's all family style. But we have these new sriracha glazed Brussels sprouts.
Oh my God, I love Brussels sprouts.
See, I'm not a huge fan of Brussels sprouts, but these sriracha glazed Brussels sprouts, I don't know how our kitchen elves do it, but they're pretty magical.
Yeah, that sounds really good. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to look forward to everything that you do because I just feel like you're a force that's going to change the world. If anything can. You seem to be tireless.
Yeah, well, I just can't think of anything better to do. You know, like buying stuff ends up making you feel hollow. Being selfish and pursuing a career is sad and trite. I mean, like going out and trying to like save animals and save people. What better possible use of a life could there be?
I so totally agree. Do you have animals in your home?
I do not. I travel a bit, and I haven't figured out how to do that, to live, you know, like I'd love to have rescue companion animals, but I just don't know how to bring them with me when I go places.
No, I feel that that's a great loss for you, and I hope you work that out because your passion is so strong. I would love to see you have that connection. But thanks for...
Well, luckily, because I live in Los Angeles, I live right by Griffith Park, so I see animals all the time. I mean, I see coyotes and snakes and spiders and weird lizards and all sorts of things. And so I have a rich life with animals. And I guess maybe the good thing is I don't have to pick up their poop.
That's an excellent point. Thanks so much for doing this, Moby. It was really fascinating.
Oh, my pleasure. It was really nice talking with you. Thanks.
This episode is brought to you through the generosity of Dr. Barnard's. Dr. Barnard's is a family business committed to making socially and environmentally responsible products of the highest quality and dedicating profits to help make a better world. Dr. Barnard's donates over $500,000 every year to support animal rights organizations and causes. More information about Dr. Barnard's and their vegan fair trade products can be found at drbarnard.com. And by the way, I love Dr. Barnard, and it's all I use, and I love what they stand for. Thanks, Dr. Barnard's.
Now let's get right into the news. The big story of the week, obviously, was the revelation of sexual harassment complaints against Wayne Pacelle and Paul Shapiro at the Humane Society of the United States. Paul Shapiro has, of course, departed the organization. According to him, that's not related to the sexual harassment complaints. And Wayne Pacelle is still heading up the Humane Society of the United States. But according to this story in the Washington Post, Humane Society donors call for firing of chief executive after sexual harassment complaints. So there have been a number of donors who have criticized the board for keeping Wayne Pacelle on. This story is, of course, so upsetting to us all, and we will continue to report on it as it plays out. Our next story is also a very upsetting story, and this had to do with the Grammys. This is from Metro, and James Corden gave out puppies as Grammy consolation prizes, and people are not happy. So though there were a lot of very positive stories about this, acting like this was adorable, it was actually very distressing. And apparently it's not just you and me, it's a lot of people really spoke out against this. These were very tiny puppies. And aside from them being tiny puppies, they're being given to people who might not even want them. Though hopefully all of the people, since they're wealthy and famous, will make sure the dogs are cared for. But the situation must have been very frightening for the dogs. It was just completely stupid. And as if dogs are just things that have no reality, like don't have their own personal reality. These dogs must have just been, they were tiny. They're probably from puppy mills, and they're probably just weaned, and just dreadful, and weaned too early. Dreadful stuff. All right, from MedPage today, agencies devise new, quote, roadmap to limit animal testing. So this is very good news, really good news. This has to do with 16 federal agencies that all came together to release this roadmap. And the idea is to come up with ways to limit toxicological testing on animals. And they're not going to eliminate it. They're just talking about limiting it, but so many animals are used in these kinds of tests, and the fact that alternative models are being devised is just really good news. And so the goal here is to encourage test developers to connect with potential users and establish confidence in the new methods and push the federal agencies and the regulated industries to adopt these new methods and after they've been validated. So there is work ahead, but this is really serious progress. This is the kind of thing, that it's a step-by-step process, and it's agonizing and really it just doesn't happen all at once. So it's hard to see the positives without also seeing, the sad continuation of this horror imposed upon animals. But this is a real sign of progress. On the other side of governmental non-progress from High Country News, Interior cancels decades-old protections for migratory birds. This is absolutely disastrous. The Trump administration has rolled back protections for migratory birds under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, which is a very old law, and has acted most birds are migratory. A great many birds are migratory. So this protects enormous numbers of different kinds of birds. And the new interpretation that is going to be imposed by the Trump administration forbids only intentional killing of the birds, and that's without a permit. And that's ridiculous, because the most killing of these birds, what happens is not, nobody's trying to kill the birds. Well, some people are, but the most birds are killed by people who aren't trying to. They're just by industries that they don't care whether they kill the birds, and they kill them while they're oil drilling, through wind power facilities, communication towers. And, they had to take care to avoid killing birds in those projects, and now they won't have to. This is dreadful, dreadful news. Okay, I'm going to end with two stories, two related stories, both of which I think are good news. Tyson invests in Memphis Meats. Another major meat industry player is investing in Memphis Meats, which is developing clean meat or sell grown meat, and now that means that a lot of major investors are really putting money into Memphis Meats, and they're getting closer and closer to producing a product. Also, Cargill, which has already invested in Memphis Meats. This is from Veg News. Cargill invests in plant-based protein, and this has to do with Cargill working on developing not clean meat in this instance, but protein derived from peas. And when this big money gets involved in these foods, the progress is going to go faster. So this is all a little good news to leave you with. And that's it for this week's news. If you're not a member of the flock yet, I hope you will consider joining it. We would love to have you. It's really a good deal. It's $10 a month. You can join for a whole year for $100. And for that, you'll become a member of the flock. You will receive access to the exclusive bonus content that you hear us talking about each week, and we put it out every week. And sometimes it's an interview with the person we're interviewing that week on the podcast. Sometimes it's something different, but it's always really good. I think. I think it's. We weren't sure whether to start doing that, and we're really pleased we did, because we're really happy with the way it's come out, and I think people are really enjoying those bonus pieces. You also get access to the Flock Only Facebook page, which has really become a great place for people to come together, talk about their problems, their complaints, their joys. It's really a nice, friendly group, if you like that sort of thing. Not everybody's a Facebook person, but if you are, I think you'd really like being part of it. It's only $10 a month. Did I mention that? And the most important thing, I hope, if you're a fan of the podcast, is that you'll be supporting it, and you'll help us keep it going. And we'd really, really appreciate that. So go to ourhenhouse.org/donate and consider joining. We'd love to have you.
Hi, everybody. This is Jasmine again, and as you know, my guest today is Dr. Neal Barnard, who helms PCRM, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, and is outspoken on a number of topics, including some you might even be surprised to hear about, such as music, because in addition to being an incredible medical doctor and helming this world-changing organization, he is a very talented musician and has done quite a bit of research into the role that music can play in our own healing. And anyway, I talked to Dr. Barnard about so many topics, from diabetes to New Year's resolutions to the rise of athleticism and plant-based diets in the mainstream, and music. Here is my talk with Dr. Neal Barnard.
Welcome back to our henhouse, Dr. Barnard.
Well, it's great to be back with you.
I am so excited to chat with you. I had the pleasure of seeing you and being part of a PCRM event last month in California, and I'm just continually impressed by all of the work that you are doing over at PCRM to change the world for animals and to really mainstream veganism. And since it is now the new year, Happy New Year, first of all. Do you actually believe in resolutions for yourself?
I believe in resolutions, but I'm not so sure that they need to be delayed until December 31st at midnight. I think it's important to make them sort of when you need them.
Speaking about New Year's resolutions, do you think that they can be used to help people move in new directions vis-a-vis
Sure.
eating habits?
Absolutely. And, even though I do think we should make resolutions when we need to, it's not entirely unsensible to make a New Year's resolution about health or weight. And the reason is that all the months leading up to New Year's Day, that's when it's been darker, cooler, in some places really downright frosty compared to the rest of the year. And that's when people gain all the weight that they gain in the course of the year. But if you look at the curve of people's weight. In the spring, they're all losing weight because it's getting warmer and you're getting outside. And during the summer, people don't gain weight either. And because when it's warm, people just eat more lightly than they do otherwise. But once it starts getting cooler, we're kind of like squirrels stuffing our cheeks full of nuts, and we tend to gain weight. And so by around the end of December, we've had it. And so people resolve to lose weight, not just because it's a new year, but because this is the natural trajectory of winter weight gain.
Yeah, I know that there's that January is a big go vegan month just in general.
Sure,
and of course, there's like the Veganuary campaign to back that up. And PCRM does quite a lot of work too, just with, is it the Kickstart program?
Yep. Yeah, the 21-day vegan Kickstart. And it's a cool thing. Every day you get an email with menus and recipes and cooking videos. It's all free. And we've had about 600,000 people do it. If people want to check it out, it's on our website, pcrm.org, and you'll see the Kickstart in English and Spanish, Mandarin, Japanese, one for people from the Indian subcontinent with all Indian ingredients and Indian recipes. So it's really cool. People love it.
So one of the most exciting developments, I think, on the health front has been the increase in athletes who are turning to high-performance vegan diets for, like, optimum performance. I just actually last night was able to watch a screener of the new documentary, The Game Changers, and it really is a game changer. Just all of this movement is kind of blowing my mind. Can you tell us a little bit about the latest developments and what you're most excited about on this front?
Well, I am so envious that you have seen Game Changers. I haven't seen it yet. How was it?
Oh my God. I mean, it's just mind blowing to see all of these like top performing Olympic athletes in one place, like thriving on plants and like from weightlifters to surfers to obviously long distance runners. But I feel like we've kind of known about the long distance runners for more time than the other athletes. But what about like the NFL and the NBA? I mean, there seem to be people going vegan left and right.
Yeah, there are. And then the cool thing recently was the Formula One champion, Lewis Hamilton, who, Formula One isn't so big in the U.S., but worldwide it's huge. These are the top auto racers, and what they need is concentration. And he said he has never felt better than when he went vegan, and shortly after that, then he won the world championship for the fourth time. And he's just it's amazing to see what these people do. But from a scientific standpoint, it really makes sense that people would want that edge that a completely plant-based diet will give you. And number one, if you're running out of gas in your athletic endeavor, whether you're a runner, a tennis player, or whatever, if you're losing your energy, that can be because your muscles are not oxygenating very well, or your brain is not oxygenating. In other words, your circulatory system, the blood flow is slowing down. It's not getting the oxygen into the muscle, so you get tired. It's not getting oxygen to your brain, so you're kind of losing your edge. It turns out when people go on a vegan diet, their blood is less viscous, or really less thick, would be the way to put it. Their blood flows more easily, and that's just because you don't have cheese fat and chicken fat particles flowing in your blood. So you got better blood flow, and that means your tissues can oxygenate better. So, even if you're a top-level athlete and you're really working really hard, if you can get that edge so that your blood flow is better, and it's partly the oxygenation, it's partly also that if you're reversing any atherosclerotic narrowings in your arteries, which you can have in the arteries to the legs, the arteries to the brain, the arteries to the lower back, as well as the arteries to the heart, that gives you an edge. So Yeah, it makes total sense. So it started with the long-distance runners, then it was the Serena Williams and Venus Williams doing it for kind of an anti-inflammatory effect. And then we saw it with all the basketball players who were doing it, now Formula One, because they need the concentration. So I agree, it's a fantastic thing to see. And I think this is just the beginning. We're going to now start seeing kids in high school and college say, give me that edge. That's what I want to do.
Well, yeah, I think that there's still there's actually still a kind of long way to go in terms of mainstream awareness about the benefits of a vegan diet within athleticism, because I do think that meat is still associated so much with strength. Why is there this stranglehold that the meat industrial complex has in terms of like the way Americans think when it comes to our misconceptions about the health benefits of animal products?
Well, I think some of it does come back. It's sort of what you said. It's sort of the images that are in people's minds. If I'm a mighty warrior and I can go out and kill an antelope, that should impress the people around me with my skill. You can sort of understand why those images come up. But on the other hand, that has nothing to do with actually eating a carcass. And when you eat it, it's like eating a brain does not make you smart. Eating muscle tissue doesn't give you muscles, and if it did, cats would all be, cats are eating meat all the time, and they don't have big rippling muscles. And in contrast, rhinoceroses and cows and bulls and horses are vegan, and they have massive muscles that they get from the protein with plants. By the way, I'll give you a number. Some people imagine that protein is in meat. In fact, you'll hear people say, I need some animal protein when they're referring to meat. But meat isn't protein. Meat is protein plus fat plus the occasional tapeworm, whatever. But anyway, they imagine that meat contains protein, and that other things do not. But if you ate nothing but broccoli, not that you would do this, but as an experiment, nothing but broccoli for a day, and if you're on a typical 2,000 calorie diet, you're getting 146 grams of pure protein just from the broccoli, which is huge. If the next day you ate only lentils, but you ate your normal 2,000 calories, you get 157 grams of protein. That's 3 times the protein that you need. So plants are loaded with it. And any normal variety of plant-based foods gives you all the amino acids you need to make complete proteins, and that's true if you're an athlete or sedentary or anybody.
So I'm not quite sure how to word this next question, but I'll try. I know that there's a lot of, for lack of a better word, fake meat on the market. And on one hand, that's amazing because it's like there's just a vegan version of every single animal product out there. And I guess what I'm wondering is, given the whole protein myth, is there a way that like vegans can actually eat too much of this fake meat and actually overdo our protein?
Well, I don't think they're going to hurt themselves, and I do think that getting away from animal tissues, whether you do it with seitan or a tofu-based thing, soy-based thing, or even the new lab-grown meats that are sort of in the news a lot nowadays, whichever way you go, it's going to be better than where you were before. But sometimes I think of meat substitutes a little bit like vegan cheeses. They're kind of vegan methadone, that you're getting over your addiction by having these things that look like meat, taste like meat, but they aren't. And as time goes on, people go through that phase, and then they discover that they feel at least as good with just very simple foods, grains and beans and vegetables and fruits. Whereas a person who's new to a vegan diet might think those foods are a little too simple.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, I know that a lot of people think that we exaggerate the health benefits of a vegan diet sometimes in order to help animals. Can you address that, how we can best avoid that happening?
Well, a vegan diet has enormous benefits, I have to say.
I guess what I'm saying, let me reword that. There's a lot of people sort of in the vegan world already who think, yeah, but veganism is not just a cure-all. People claim that veganism in and of itself is a weight loss or a health regimen, when actuality, a vegan diet can consist of Oreos and potato chips. So how do you make sure that people hear the full story?
Well, first of all, if you're a meat eater eating Oreos and potato chips, and you become a vegan eating Oreos and potato chips, that's a good move. Getting the meat and the cheese off your plate is good. So there's nothing wrong with the person making that switch. Having said that, you want to go further because, as you said earlier, there's all kinds of junk foods out there that manufacturers are making. And if they go from a cookie with butter than a cookie that has coconut oil in it, well, you don't want to park there. I mean, you really want to go further and eat truly healthy foods. But vegan diets really do have tremendous benefits. It's absolutely true. And when we use them with people who have diabetes or weight problems or whatever, we start by getting the animals off the plate. We also keep oils really low. So people are learning methods instead of frying or instead of dousing their salad with grease. They learn lighter ways to do it. And then we also teach them how to pick the healthiest things of what's out there.